A great security strategy is useless until someone turns it into a working program. That someone is the CISO, and the program is the actual work of the security team. The policies, standards, processes, activities, and projects that carry a strategy into reality. Not a stack of tools, a set of activities owned by one person. Here is the spine for the next 15 minutes. Build the program, prove it holds up, choose the technology that runs it, and keep the loop turning. Start with the boundary. A scope statement decides which security objectives are in and which are out, and which part of the organization the program even covers. Then the charter, the single authority document that organizes the program. It states the business purpose, the statement of authority, roles and responsibilities, governance, how the program is enforced, and when it gets reviewed. A charter is not just another policy. It is the program's mandate. Here is what sloppy scope looks like. An ebook publisher mandated multi-factor authentication on all access and broke its own business because customers had to authenticate just to read a book. The fix is a precise objective. MFA for sensitive corporate data, customer book access explicitly out of scope, and business alignment is ongoing, not a one-time event. How do you know the program is working? 3 families of indicators, and the exam loves to cross them up. A KPI looks back. Historical performance against objectives. A KGI tracks the goal itself. If the goal is to remove every stored social security number, the KGI is the percentage removed so far. A KRI looks forward, quantified risk that could jeopardize the future. Define the metrics in advance, before results land, or you will cherry pick. And reporting is not a dashboard left on a shelf. You present results with context, to stakeholders, on a cadence they can act on. People are the program, so the program has to keep teaching. 2 different jobs. Training imparts new knowledge, formal, role-based. A system administrator gets technical depth. A customer service rep gets social engineering defense. Awareness is the reminder layer. Posters, short videos, email. Less formal, always on. And it never stops. New hires get initial training at join or role change, then annual refreshers. Phishing simulations route the clickers straight back to training, because the simulation is the diagnostic. Role-specific compliance training rides along. Card handlers get PCI DSS, HR gets PII. Hat switch number 1. You are a people manager. You recruit, retain, motivate, and develop. And hiring is a long-horizon money decision, wearing a talent costume. A senior hire at $150 a year costs about $200,000 with benefits. Keep that person 5 years and you are near $1 million, so do not just fill the seat. Pick deliberately. On the retention side, development and certification work, they keep skills current, validate them, and help you recruit and hold a cross-trained team. Hat switch number 2. You are a financial manager. The budget is a financial plan on a fiscal year clock, and the fiscal year may not be the calendar year. A July 1st start splits each calendar year across 2 fiscal years, and you cannot plan cash until you know which one the organization runs. 2 planning styles: incremental, last year's budget plus or minus a percentage, or zero-based, where every dollar justifies itself from nothing. Then the 2 flavors of money. CapEx, big one-time assets, buildings, equipment, printers. OpEx, the day-to-day recurring spend, payroll, electricity, maintenance. Different budgets, different tax treatment, and you cannot move money between them. Monitor the spend, hold a contingency reserve for the unexpected, and treat a fat year-end surplus as the error it is. Opportunity cost, not a win. Security does not run alone. Procurement owns the vendor lifecycle. Evaluate, contract, onboard, monitor, offboard, with data ownership named in the contract. Accounting backstops the purchases that slip past procurement. HR owns screening and written agreements with asset return, plus the two access traps that live in job changes. First trap: an employee moves roles, gets the new permissions, and never loses the old ones. That is privilege creep, a least privilege violation, caught by account audits done with managers. Second trap: termination timing. Revoke access too early, and you tip off the person who is about to be fired. Too late, and they reach systems after the meeting. Time the revocation to the notification. IT owns least privilege and separation of duties. Two people for sensitive functions. Because a single person who can both set up a vendor and cut a check to it is how the fake vendor theft works. IT also owns change management, where every request goes through an RFC and a change advisory board. An audit stands apart, independent, confirming compliance without being part of the system it checks. Now prove it. Controls rot quietly, so you run a continuous loop. Pick scan targets from the asset inventory, data classification, and exposure. Set scan frequency from risk, regulation, and business drivers, not from habit. Configure the scans carefully. Intrusive plugins can damage production, so they get run in a test environment first. Remote scans miss what they cannot see from the outside, so supplement them with credentialed read-only scans and agent-based scans from inside. Then remediate, verify, and close the loop back to targets. Now the distinction the exam probes hardest. A scan is passive, broad, and automated. It identifies and lists. A penetration test is active, targeted, and offensive. It exploits a subset to prove the risk, under a defined scope and rules of engagement agreed before anyone touches anything. Think like the electronics store owner reasoning through shoplifting, robbery, and employee embezzlement, then building a control against each threat. That threat-first mindset is what a pen test applies to a technical environment. The box type sets what the tester knows. White box, full access to internals. Black box, nothing. Gray box, somewhere in between. Different box, different findings. The last rung of the proving ladder tests people and process, not just machines. A tabletop exercise walks a fictitious scenario around a table, with no real systems at all. Red team and disaster recovery tests run live, but only inside a dedicated, safe test environment. Findings from both feed back into policy, training, and controls. Step back from the act. The program is built and it is proven. Scope and charter. Metrics reported with context. A team you hire and develop. A budget you monitor. Security woven into the business. Then, the vulnerability loop. The scoped pen test, and the exercises. Before the technology act, set the lens. This is a management exam. You select technology, you apply it, and you manage the teams that run it. You are not tested on configuring internals. Domain 3 carries roughly a quarter of the exam, and only a couple of questions go deep into this chapter's technical detail. So for the next 6 areas, the depth is the trade-off, not the mechanism. Endpoint. Anti-malware catches threats 2 ways. Signature detection matches known patterns, so the definition files stay fresh. Heuristic detection models normal and flags the anomaly. EDR extends that into a response. Detect, contain, investigate, remediate. Then DLP stops data leaving, with 2 legs. Host-based DLP finds sensitive data already stored on the endpoint and blocks the USB stick. Network-based DLP watches outbound traffic and blocks it or auto-encrypts it. Network. Segment systems by security level, so a compromise stays contained and insiders are deterred. The firewall holds 3 zones: the untrusted internet, the DMZ for the services the outside must reach, and the intranet core. Zero Trust removes the assumption that where a system sits grants it anything. VLANs segment logically, and they need pruning. Only trunk what a switch actually needs. Plus, hop blocking. Port security limits the allowed MAC addresses on a port, and static beats sticky. Edge switches live in every building, so they need physical protection. VPNs protect the data in transit. Cloud. The question is never whether the cloud is secure. It is who owns what. The provider always owns the hardware and the physical data center. As you climb from IaaS to PaaS to SaaS, the customer slice shrinks, but it never disappears. You keep your data and your access control configuration in every model. Write that split down, control by control, for compliance. The cloud provider handles security is the sentence that gets auditors angry. Cryptography, at the level a manager reasons about it. Symmetric, one shared key, very fast, no non-repudiation. Asymmetric, a public and private key pair. Scalable, but slow, so you use it to set up the session, then hand off to symmetric for the bulk. A digital signature signs a message digest with the private key, and it proves integrity, authentication, and non-repudiation, but not privacy. Nobody can read a signature. The PKI anchors trust. A certificate authority endorses public keys in X509 certificates, and revocation is checked by CRL or OCSP before you trust the key. Code. Software moves through environments: development, test, staging, production, with change management providing the accountability. Delivery models differ. Waterfall goes straight through, Spiral iterates with a risk assessment each cycle, and Agile runs sprints. DevSecOps bakes security in across the whole cycle, and CI/CD runs automated security testing in the pipeline. Code review catches defects early, from pair programming up to the formal Fagan inspection. And 3 test types catch different flaw classes. Static analysis reads the code, dynamic analysis runs it, and fuzzing bombards it with invalid input. Identity, the thread that ties it all together. Access control is 3 steps. Identification, the claim, I am Mike Chappell. Authentication, the proof, the driver's license. Authorization, the permission, the guard checks the appointment list. Authentication rests on 3 factor types: something you know, something you are, something you have. MFA means combining different factor types, so a password plus a security question is not MFA. Both are something you know. Watch the error model. A false acceptance is the serious one, letting the wrong person in. A false rejection is an availability cost. SSO shares the session. Federation shares identity across systems. And deprovisioning is timed to the notice. Too early tips off the person. Too late leaves access alive after the firing. Pull the 3 acts together, because it is one loop. Charter, measure, staff, fund, integrate, test. Choose the technology and improve. The exam rewards the manager, who keeps the loop turning. One last thing, because the confusion pairs are where points die. You will be tempted to call the charter just a policy, to mix up the KPI looking back with the KRI looking forward, to treat awareness as training, to move CapEx money into OpEx, to call a scan a penetration test, to assume the cloud provider owns your security, to let a signature do privacy's job, to treat identification as authentication, to count a password and a security question as multi-factor, and to call a false rejection. None of those are true. Keep the loop turning, and you know what the answer to every one of them is. 2 in the morning, the CM pages, and the data center flood alarm just went off. 1 floor up, the CEO just emailed the help desk. My PC is acting weird. 3 alarms, 1 night, 1 organization. Which of these is a real incident? Which team owns each one? And in what order do you work them? Hold that question. By the end of this video, you will know exactly how to answer it, because the next 15 minutes are the entire job of the manager who owns incident response and business continuity. And it starts with one triage decision. First, the decision that starts everything. Is this an incident? NIST draws the line with 3 words. An event is anything that happens: a scan, a login, a flood siren. An adverse event suggests a security policy violation, the keylogger alert on that CEO laptop. An incident is the confirmed violation, policy broken, response required. The funnel runs one way. Every incident contains events, but most events die in the funnel, and that is the point. Only the incident flips the switch that wakes the response machine. The exam loves to hand you an event and ask what it really is. If it has not been confirmed as a violation, the answer is triage it, log it, let it die in the funnel. Now the map for everything that follows. NIST 800-61 gives incident response 4 phases: preparation, detection and analysis, containment, eradication and recovery, and post-incident activity. But it is not a line. 2 arrows run backward. Containment loops back through detection and analysis to confirm it actually held, and post-incident loops all the way back into preparation, because the lessons learned change how you prepare. That second arrow is the whole identity of this domain. Response is a cycle. If your mental diagram ends at the report, it is wrong. And so is the answer that treats response as a straight checklist. The first phase is the only one that runs every day: preparation. The foundation is the incident response policy, and the plan document sits on top of it, carrying scope, roles, procedures, and reporting. The team forms one of 4 shapes: internal, external, collocated, or integrated, with a manager who activates and declares, incident handlers, forensics people, legal, communications, and senior management. NIST keeps a minimum gear bag ready: forensic workstation, bootable media, spare hardware, blank media, capture tools. Then the notification path. And here is the rule that trips people up. Any employee can be the first responder. And the first responder calls the CSRT. They do not investigate. The phone tree runs to a last person who confirms the whole chain. Finally, classification and categorization. A severity score plus an incident type. So the right resources wake up for the right problem. So the incident happens. Evidence arrives 4 ways. And those 4 categories are the recall structure: system alerts, logs, publicly available vulnerability information, and human reports. That CEO email is the 4th one. You improve detection by profiling normal behavior, correlating in a CISM, syncing time with NTP, and capturing packets. But the validation decision, is this really an incident, is more art than science. 2 teams with the same data can point at different things. Detection feeds containment, and the 4 categories are what you will be asked to identify. Containment is the judgment beat. NIST hands you 6 criteria and says there is no formula: the damage or theft involved, evidence preservation, availability, time and cost, effectiveness, and duration. And pinned above all 6, human health and safety comes first. Always. There is no equation that balances those, because the right answer depends on what this incident actually is. This is a management exam, and the single most important decision in the incident half is this one. Eradicate first? Wrong. Restore first? Wrong. You contain first, then decide. Now the 3 containment rungs, and the key that makes them click. What can the compromised system still reach? Segment it. Move it to a quarantine VLAN. It can still reach some internal things. Through a gate. Isolate it. Either cut the system to the internet only, or isolate the attacker by sandboxing. Remove it. Pull the cable, 0 reach. 3 definitions, the exam swaps in every permutation. And here is the twist the exam keeps reusing. The malware pings 8.8.8.8 every 30 seconds. Pull the cable, and no ping goes out. Missed pings trigger the dead man's switch. The malware wipes its evidence or encrypts the disk. Removal is strong. It is not foolproof. Somewhere inside containment, you are also doing paperwork that decides whether this is admissible. The chain of custody is a receipt, and every single handling has to log 4 things: what it is, location, serials, hostname, MAC, IP. Who touched it, name, title, phone number. When time, date, and time zone, the exam checks the time zone and where it lives. A broken receipt does not just weaken your case. It makes the evidence inadmissible. Eradication has a fork, and the wrong road costs you. Chasing the attacker is often futile. The intrusion hopped through compromised hosts and borders, and law enforcement's goals conflict with yours. Worse, the hunt delays business recovery. Root cause analysis is the road that works. It tells you how to rebuild safely, and it lets you sweep for every other system with the same flaw, the same misconfigured router on every floor. Find the cause, fix the class of problem, get the business back. Then clean, rebuild, and prove it. Eradication. Remove the artifacts, sanitize the media, secure the accounts. Rebuild from a known secure image, but first check the backup, because a backup taken during the incident carries the same vulnerability, and you just reinfected yourself. Patch in order. Directly compromise systems first, then related, then the enterprise. Media sanitization is a spectrum: clear, purge, destroy. And every level gets its own validation step, even destroy. That is the 888 scheme. And validation is the word that separates a sanitized drive from a hope. Finally, the 4 verification gates. Authorized accounts only, least privilege permissions, logging to the central repository, and a vulnerability scan started. Skip a gate, and the incident comes back on Monday. Close the incident with 3 artifacts. First, the live lessons learned meeting, and the facilitator has to be independent, someone who was not in the response. A self-led retrospective is where bias survives. Second, the retention clock, 2-year private default, 3-year federal floor, and you ask the attorney before you discard anything. Third, the formal final report. What happened? Which systems? What damage? Who did what? And what changes? And the report has to drive something. Management acts on the findings and reassesses risk. That arrow back into preparation is the loop from earlier. Made real. Reset before the floor floods. Not every event is an incident. 4 phases with loops. Not a line. Contain before you cure. Know what it can still reach. Evidence is a receipt. What, who, when, with time zone, where. Root cause over attacker hunt. Clear, purge, destroy. Each validated. Independent lessons learned. 2 versus 3 years. Written report. The incident is closed. The water is real. Back to the data center. The incident is contained, but the flood alarm was not a false positive. Water is in the room. Now, the second half of the domain. First, the distinction. A business interruption is a disruption you absorb with normal operations. A vendor is late, a branch is slow. A disaster exceeds normal coping, and that is when the DRP triggers. Second, the scope. The BCP covers the whole business. The DRP is its IT subset, nested inside, not a sibling. Ownership is layered. Senior management approves, funds, and stays accountable. The BCP manager coordinates and maintains. IT delivers the DRP inside the BCP. And one row of the disaster taxonomy bridges back to Act 1, cyber incidents. The BCP and DRP teams integrate with the IR teams. These are one system, not two jobs. The Recovery Act runs on one artifact, the business impact analysis. And the trap is in the unit of analysis, functions, not systems. Walk it as one example. A grain processing plant floods. What matters is not the server rack. It is production, shipment, sales, functions, each with resource needs, exposure, effects on other functions, recovery priority, planning windows, documented. Losing a function is the real harm, because failures cascade. Production delay stops shipment. Shipment stops sales. And the priority bar has people on it. When the plant floods, the fire suppression system outranks order processing. People first, always. That is the answer the exam rewards. From the BIA's planning windows, 2 dials come out, 2 they get swapped on the exam with loving precision. RTO, recovery time objective, the maximum time you may be down. The clock. RPO, recovery point objective, the maximum age of data you can afford to lose. The tape. Both are set per function, and RPO directly chooses backup frequency. Fresher data means more backups. The math makes them real. Avalanche on a $3 million facility. Building value 90%. Annual rate of occurrence 5%. Single loss expectancy 2.7 million. Annualized 135,000. Florida hurricane on a 15 million headquarters. 10% ARO, 50% exposure factor, ALE 750,000. Insurance footnote. Know whether you are on replacement cost or actual cash value. Now the money question. Where does the business run when the site is gone? A spectrum by activation time versus cost. Cold, space, power, network, nothing else. Weeks to activate, cheapest. Think the chop shop in boiler room. Warm, pre-configured equipment, no data, 12 plus hours. Hot, fully replicated, seconds to minutes. Roughly doubles the budget. And cloud as the on-demand option. The exam frame is cost and benefit, not a quiz. Weigh the plan's cost against the loss the BIA priced in. Even the cheapest plan must meet the critical functions RTO and RPO, and overinvesting wastes capital. 2 warnings. A shared site can be overwhelmed in a regional disaster, and a hot site must be secured like production, not treated like a spare room. Data recovery has 2 lanes, and both are chosen by the RPO you just set. Lane 1, backups, full, incremental, differential. The Saturday morning outage. Restore from a Monday full plus a Friday differential, with 2 media sets. Restore from a Monday full plus Wednesday and Friday incrementals, with the whole chain. More backup time buys less restore time. Count the media, and you will never confuse them again. Add offsite storage and media rotation. Lane 2. Database replication. Electronic vaulting. Bulk copies, slowest RPO. Remote journaling. Frequent log transfers. Fresher. Remote mirroring. A live replica, most expensive. Same axis as the sites, time and cost. The fault tolerance block underneath both lanes. First, 9s as a budget. 99.9% availability means under 44 minutes of downtime in a 30-day month. 99.999% means 26 seconds. That is the scale a CIO budgets against. Second, RAID. At the disk level, 0 is no tolerance. 1 is a mirror. 5 is single parity. 6 is double parity. 10 is striped mirrors. And the hammer line, RAID is not a backup. The array can be destroyed, and a deletion can hit both mirrors. You still need the backup. Third, power. The UPS bridges 5 to 30 minutes to the generator, and the generator's fuel degrades, so supplier contracts are part of the design. Single point of failure, resilience, fault tolerance, high availability. That is the vocabulary the whole act is built from. A plan that is never tested is a document. The DR test spectrum runs by operational disruption. Checklist review, paperwork. Tabletop walkthrough. Roles played, no real systems. The book's own George Banks scenario, a CEO's compromised PC, walks system by system with a facilitator. Simulation, real systems, may interrupt non-critical units. Parallel, relocate to the recovery site, production keeps running. Full interruption, shut down the primary and take over. The hardest one to get management to approve. The distinction the exam re-asks in different costumes. The tabletop walks the scenario. Only the simulation tests the plan on real systems. IR gets its own exercises, activations, checklist reviews, third-party attack tools. And emergency response checklists are priority ordered. Activate the building alarm first, because a crisis eats checklists from the bottom up. Now the loop closes. The way the NIST ring always said it would. The lessons learned findings and the corrected plan flow back into preparation. First as the incident cycle, now at the whole business level. And the plan stays alive, because it is maintained. Change management, drills, retraining, job descriptions. A document you do not touch dies on the shelf. Final frame of the night. The pager goes quiet. The report is filed. The water is out, and the organization is measurably harder to break than it was at 2 a.m. That is the promise of this entire domain. Every incident and disaster it survives makes the next one less survivable. One final breath. Keep incident separate from event, and hold the 4 phases with their loops. Contain first and know its reach. Then clean, rebuild, verify. Interruption versus disaster. BCP the business. DRP the IT subset. Functions, not systems. RTO the clock. RPO the tape. Cold, warm, hot. 2 data lanes. 9s. RAID is not a backup. UPS, then generator. Test it, feed it back into preparation. It is a cycle, and the exam tests the cycle, not the list. A scan found an open port, closing it removes the vulnerability, never the threat. Here is the problem. The scan found a server exposing port 22 to the internet. Somewhere out there, brute force scanners are looking for exactly that. Closing the port kills the risk, but not because it stopped the attackers. The scanners keep scanning. What the fix removed is the vulnerability. Start with a picture. You walk along a sidewalk, exposed. A speeding bicycle is the threat. The combination of the two is the risk. Park your bike in a garage and the bicycles still ride, but your risk is gone. Note that the garage itself can fail, because every control can create new risk. A threat is the potential cause. A vulnerability is the weakness that makes it possible. And risk lives only where they meet. A control removes a vulnerability. It can never remove a threat. Risks arrive from more places than attackers. External risks come from outside. A city power outage takes your own facilities down through a shared utility, which makes it a multi-party risk. Internal risks start in-house, a flawed process or a careless user. Legacy systems risk piling up when a mainframe that cannot be patched simply cannot be modernized. And some risk is about ownership, not code, stolen intellectual property, licensing disputes. Name the origin first, because the origin decides who owns the fix. Now, size it. Risk severity combines two numbers: likelihood, how often it happens, and impact, how bad it is when it does. The formula is conceptual, not a calculator. A bicycle hitting you is likely and moderately bad. A meteor is catastrophic and nearly impossible. Same model, opposite decisions. And regulation can multiply impact. A data breach with GDPR fines behind it is no longer just a technology problem. When numbers exist, use them. Work the example slowly, because every number here shows up again on test day. Your email server sells at $1,000 an hour, and denial of service attacks hit 3 times a year, 3 hours each. The asset is not the box. The box is not damaged. The asset is the capability to send email, worth $3,000 across those 3 hours. That is AV, the asset value. During the attack, the server runs at 10% capacity, so the exposure factor is 90%. SLE is the single loss expectancy, 3,000 times 90%, 2,700. ALE, the annualized loss expectancy, is SLE times the annual rate of occurrence, 3.0, $8,100 a year. That number is your budget for the fix. A prevention service costs under $8,100 a year. It is worth buying. Over, it is not. And watch out. Scenario writers pad these numbers with extra facts that are only there to distract you. Not everything prices. Reputation, public health, employee morale have no dollar value. That is where the qualitative matrix takes over. Probability on one axis, magnitude on the other. Stolen unencrypted devices and spear phishing both land in the high corner, so a limited budget goes to full disk encryption and a secure email gateway, not to hardening the data center physically. The matrix is not a second-class tool. It still ranks, and it still spends. Some risk ships to you. Leaked documents showed the NSA intercepting hardware shipments to foreign countries and implanting malicious code deep in the devices. If your hardware can be tampered with before it crosses your door, no internal control catches it. That is why third-party relationships need due diligence, and why hardware source authenticity checks exist. And the picture goes stale on its own. Risk is reassessed when the world changes. New types of attackers, new business lines, new regulations, geopolitical shifts. Sometimes there is no obvious change at all, so periodic reviews happen anyway. The tripwire is the KRI, the key risk indicator, quantitative, monitorable, and threshold-driven. When it crosses its line, reassessment fires. That tripwire is the loop this whole video keeps returning to. Now, the decision. 1 risk, 4 legitimate answers. Take laptop theft. Cable locks and tamper-proof stop tags reduce the chance or the cost. Mitigate. Ban laptops entirely and the risk disappears. Along with the business need, avoid. Property insurance pays to replace the hardware. Transfer. Or analyze it, decide the cost outweighs the impact, and do nothing on purpose. Accept. Now the website under a distributed denial of service. Buy more bandwidth or a scrubbing service. Mitigate. Shut the site down Avoid. The ultimate denial of service. General insurance policies exclude cyber events, so you buy cybersecurity insurance. Transfer. Run on, eyes open. Accept. Mitigation is the default answer. Avoidance is the one that costs the business its own activity. And here is the trap that follows immediately. A team says, "We accept this risk," and moves on, having never analyzed it. That is not an accepted risk. It is an unmanaged risk. Acceptance is a decision that comes out of analysis, usually because the cost of mitigating exceeds the impact. Without the analysis, you have not chosen anything at all. So when do you stop? Before any controls, the business carries its inherent risk. Every control, every avoided practice, every policy moves the number down to the residual risk. And you stop buying controls when the residual risk sits at or below the organization's risk appetite, the level of risk it has decided it will pay to live with. Controls are bought until they stop paying. One bridge to the business side: control risk. In financial audits, weak internal controls can cause a material misstatement of the numbers, and IT risk counts when it threatens the integrity or availability of financial information. That is why auditors test the controls that guard the ledger, not just the ledger itself, then report it. The risk register is the team's detailed tracker, one careful record per risk, often far too detailed for executives. The board gets the heat map, a compact probability and magnitude view of the risks that matter most to goals. Both run on a regular rhythm, and both have an urgent channel for when the situation moves faster than the calendar. Match the artifact to the audience. In a mature organization, the loop is not a project. It is a habit, with 3 homes. Development bakes security in from the start, instead of bolting it on. Procurement runs a formal vendor risk assessment before the contract. And every project assesses the new or changed risk its work introduces. Enterprise risk management means the loop lives inside the business, not beside it. Act 4. The lights go out. Disasters, natural or human, will happen. The disaster recovery plan exists because of that. The business impact analysis finds the mission-essential functions and the systems that carry them. Then, the 4 metrics that get crossed up most. 2 tests separate them. Measured versus tolerated. MTBF, the mean time between failures, and MTTR, the mean time to repair, are facts you measure about the system. RTO and RPO are decisions the business tolerates. And time versus data. RTO, the recovery time objective, is the maximum tolerable downtime, a window in time. RPO, the recovery point objective, is the maximum tolerable data loss, an amount of data, not a time. The web store tolerates 4 hours down and 15 minutes of lost orders. Fix it in 2, keep the last 10 minutes, and both tolerances hold. And anywhere one failure ends the service, that component is a single point of failure. A server with a single power supply. The supply dies, the server dies. Add a second supply, and the single point of failure is gone. But if that server is the only one serving the website, the whole server is now the single point of failure, and the fix is to cluster a second one. No single component gets to own continuity. Now, the people's data. First, find where the sensitive data lives. Personally identifiable information, health data, financial records, government data. Then classify it by sensitivity and the impact of disclosure. In U.S. government terms, the latter has an exact order: top secret, then confidential, then unclassified. And unclassified is still not releasable to the public without authorization. The business mirror uses highly sensitive, internal, and public. One rule keeps controls proportional. An asset takes the highest classification of anything it stores, processes, or transmits. A server holding both payroll and a top-secret contract is top secret. Then assign the roles. On one stage, a retailer processes customer cards. The retailer is the controller. It decides why and how personal data is processed, and it keeps the responsibility. The credit card company is the processor. It acts for the controller, but the responsibility stays with the retailer. The information security team that guards the data is the custodian, safekeeping only. The VP of HR, who owns the payroll data, is a data owner. The customer is the subject. And under GDPR, every controller must designate a data protection officer with real autonomy. The data's lifecycle is 3 disciplines. Collect only what you need. Use it only for the purpose the person consented to. Keep it only as long as you need it. Then destroy it. Shrink the retained data, and you have shrunk the breach. Protecting data in place has 3 tools with 3 different weakness stories. Hashing is one way, but if the value domain is small, like zip codes, an attacker hashes every candidate and matches. A rainbow table. Tokenization swaps values for tokens through a lookup table. Powerful, but reversible if the table leaks. So the table is what you secure. Masking just redacts, like showing the last 4 of a card number. And when it leaks anyway, activate incident response immediately, before anyone argues about whose turn it is. Then, the notification maze. Every U.S. state has its own breach law with its own trigger. Industry-specific federal rules add more. GDPR adds the EU's duties. But there is no single broad federal law covering all breaches in the United States. The overlap gets untangled with an attorney, because the duties are jurisdiction and industry-specific. Act 6. Turn to the threat side of the triangle. First, the 4 axes you classify any actor on: internal or external, sophistication, resources, and motivation. Then, the cast. The script kiddie runs free tools at whatever is vulnerable. Low skill, real damage. The hacktivist attacks for a cause, and an employee can hacktivist against their own employer. The criminal syndicate wants money and stays in the shadows. Ransomware, card data, denial of service for hire. The advanced persistent threat is a nation-state operating for years with its own 0 days. Stuxnet is the famous one. The insider already has the keys, and behavioral assessments with HR are how you find them. Shadow IT, like a personal Dropbox in the finance team, leaks data to an uncontrolled vendor while signaling an unmet business need. The competitor buys what insiders and dark web markets sell. Then, the hats. White, authorized. Black, unauthorized and malicious. Gray, unauthorized but pointing out the hole. Good intent does not make gray hat activity legal. Acting without proper authorization can be a criminal offense. Then, the doors they use. Email and social media, where one successful phishing hit out of many is enough. Direct physical access. Wireless, an unsecured network reachable outside the building. Removable media, the baited USB. Cloud, the misconfigured file, the exposed credential, the leaked API key. And the third-party supply chain, the payoff of the hardware story from earlier. Match the scenario to the door. Now intelligence. And how much to trust it. Feeds carry both technical indicators, IP addresses, domains, hashes, CVEs, and the context around them. Sources span open-source intelligence, public feeds from CISA and SANS, to closed commercial intelligence. The dark web is the canary. Your credentials suddenly listed means investigate now. Then, the failure modes. When a critical Microsoft vulnerability went actively exploited, one IDS vendor shipped no detection rules for over 2 weeks. Customers on that single feed were blind the whole time, so use multiple feeds and cross-check. And threat maps flatter you. They show where traffic comes from, and attackers relay through cloud services, so the pin on the map is not the attacker's address. Score what you get on timeliness, accuracy, and relevance, and let confidence bands, from confirmed down to discredited, decide how much a finding may drive a decision. Finally, the vocabulary. Because 4 similar-sounding names do 4 different jobs. STAX is the language, an XML-based structured format with 12 domain objects, maintained by Oasis. Taxia is the truck, an HTTPS protocol built to carry sticks between systems. OpenIOC is Mandiant's separate indicator framework. And ISACs are the sector-based markets where members share threat information under the trust model and 24/7 incident response support that PDD-63 created. Language, truck, indicators, market. And do your own research too. Vendor advisories, RFCs, conferences, tracking techniques, tactics, and procedures. Pull it together, because the whole domain is one loop. Identify the risk, measure it, with numbers when you have them, and a matrix when you don't. Choose the response. Report it to the audience that can act. And the threats from this final act are the threats from the first beat. The actors, the vectors, the intelligence, and the KRIs keep firing reassessment. Identify, measure, respond, report, repeat. The threat is out there, and it is mostly not yours. The vulnerability is yours. A stolen laptop caused 5 kinds of damage, and the board wants answers. New product plans, left in a rideshare backseat. The device is cheap, the damage is not. Competitors get the roadmap, strategic and financial. The press covers it, reputational. Work stops, operational. A regulator shows up, compliance. One incident, 5 categories at once. That business impact lens frames this whole domain. Before the strategy, the objectives. Every control serves one of exactly 3 goals. Confidentiality, keep information from unauthorized people. Encryption, access controls, firewalls. Integrity, keep it trustworthy. Hashing, integrity monitoring. Availability, keep it there when you need it. Fault tolerance, clustering, backups. Now the trap. People reach for a 4th, non-repudiation. It is not a member of the triad, it is the distractor. And the threats are not only attacks. A power spike corrupting data is an integrity event. A fire destroying a data center is an availability event. Human error and mechanical failure count. Flip the coin. Each goal has a matching threat. Disclosure against confidentiality. Alteration against integrity. Denial against availability. Each threat violates exactly one objective. That mapping is the whole point. And a ready-made checklist. Assessing any asset. Ask 3 questions. Does it hold sensitive data, so disclosure would hurt? Would modification damage it? Is it mission critical, so disruption stops work? And disclosure is not only the attacker. A misconfigured access control, a lost device, data slipping out by accident. Same laptop, 5 costs. Financial is not just the invoice, the revenue the competitor takes with your roadmap. Reputational is the coverage. Strategic is the plan being used against you. Operational is the stalled work. Compliance is the sanction when regulated data is involved. Lost patient records mean a HIPAA violation and HHS penalties. Then it gets personal. PII stretches the breach past your walls. Social security numbers, card data, driver's license numbers, passport data. A customer PII breach hits at once. Media, fines, identity protection costs, and the victim is the person whose identity is for sale. Who answers the board? The security leader wears two hats: the cybersecurity subject matter expert and the business leader. That split separates a leader from a practitioner, and it frames everything next. And watch scope. Information security is wider than cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is the digital subset. Paper records count. A scenario pointing at paper files tests whether you notice the wider lens. Now the chain. Where the CISO sits is a signal of how much the organization values security. Look at the buried case. CISO under a Director of Technology Infrastructure, who reports to the CIO. 3 problems. Status. The lower you sit, the lower the priority. Conflict of interest. That director's assets are what your audits judge, and you report findings upward through the person you judged. Cross-team conflicts get hard to settle. The rule that survives every scenario: never place security under a function it must audit. A direct line upward. Now, the team beneath the CISO. Span of control. Under 5 direct reports, too few. Over 10, hard to manage. 7, the sweet spot. Then, racy. For each job, name who is responsible, who is accountable, who is consulted, who is informed. The discipline. Exactly 1 Yancarta. Accountable. The R does the work, the A is where the buck stops. Incident response. CISO accountable, incident team responsible. Legal consulted, CEO informed. The leader's most important job is strategy, creating, implementing, and maintaining the path from where the organization is to where it needs to be. The next 3 beats are the analyses that draw that path. 3 analyses, 1 pipeline. First, threat research. Name the adversaries and the tactics they actually use. Second, SWOT. And it runs on 2 axes: internal versus external, and positive versus negative, so 4 quadrants. The trap. A new cyber insurance offering is an opportunity. A new privacy law is a threat. Anything external is never a strength or a weakness. And you can run SWOT at any level, from 1 contributor to the CISO. Third, gap analysis. Measure current controls against control objectives, often borrowed from COBIT, and every deficiency becomes a strategy goal. Maturity models add a yardstick, CMMI levels. 1 is firefighting, 2 is per project, 3 is an organization-wide standard, and that is where reactive turns proactive. 4, quantitative. 5, optimizing. Deficiencies become goals only when they pass SMART: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. Watch the rewrite. Before, improve our vulnerability management program. Vague, nothing to measure against. After, implement daily network vulnerability scanning for all production systems by the end of this year. Same intent, now testable. And achievable means realistic, not easy. Stretch goals are allowed. The pattern to recognize on any question: spot the goal missing 1 of the 5. Counterpressure. Security is a cost center, so the leader keeps earning commitment by showing alignment with business goals. That alignment is the most important element for senior buy-in. Communication style is second, and the strategy never happens in a bubble. Internal influences. The business environment, the organization's risk tolerance. External. The regulatory environment, the threat landscape, emerging technology, social media, third-party pressure. Name the influences, and you can see where the strategy is being pulled. One dataset, 5 roles, walk a bank loan file. The customer is the data subject. A senior business official, the VP of loans, is the data owner, and ultimate responsibility always stays there. Never the custodian, never IT. The owner delegates day-to-day policy to a data steward. IT stores and processes as custodian. The cloud provider processes as a data processor. The trap is the reverse. Technologists are rarely owners or stewards. They are almost always custodians. 2 user groups need focused training. High-risk users, high-profile, high-risk travel. Privileged users, admins, finance staff who move money, executives, the accounts that hurt most if compromised. Now the strategy becomes controls. And controls answer 2 different questions. Mechanism, technical controls, firewalls, access control lists, intrusion prevention, encryption. Operational, access reviews, log monitoring, vulnerability management, the processes that manage the technology. Managerial, risk assessments, security planning, security embedded in change and acquisition. The classic misfiling, threat assessments and security planning are managerial, not operational. Effect, the type, preventive stops it, detective finds it, corrective fixes it after. Deterrent discourages the attempt. Guard dogs, barbed wire, physical is the body. Compensating is the alternative when the original control cannot be met. Under PCI DSS, it must match the intent and rigor of the original. And temporary exceptions carry a remediation plan. Data is exposed in 3 states, and controls must cover all 3. At rest, drives, tape, cloud, the risk is pilfering. In motion, network transit, eavesdropping. In processing, memory, active use. DLP enforces handling policy. Host-based agents on the machines. Network-based at the egress. Pattern matching catches the data. Watermarking tags it so a leak is traceable. Then shrink the prize. Destroy what you do not need. De-identify the rest. Obfuscate what remains. 3 tools, 3 weakness stories. Hashing is one way, but if the candidate values are guessable, a rainbow table reverses it. Tokenization is reversible through its lookup table, so the table is what you secure. Masking just redacts. Step out to the whole company. Owners elect a board. For public companies, a majority of independent directors, per exchange listing rules. The board hires the CEO, reviews the CEO, and can fire the CEO. Information security governance extends that chain to the CISO. The wrinkle: the CISO has no direct operational control over the organization, so enforcement runs through policy. GRC holds governance, risk, and compliance together, and governance systems are dynamic and tailored. Created once, never changed, is the false statement. The tool behind the buy-in is the security business case, and it reuses the organization's own existing format. 6 components: a scope statement, the strategic context, a cost analysis that covers one-time and recurring costs, an evaluation of alternatives, a project plan, and a management plan. Missing the recurring side is the classic incomplete case. Vendors are bound by paper, and 6 agreement types sort by job. The master service agreement is the umbrella for ongoing security and privacy terms. Statements of work are the project work under it. Service-level agreements carry the conditions and remedies when they slip. A memorandum of understanding is informal, often internal. A business partnership agreement binds 2 organizations. An NDA covers confidentiality. Pattern, long-term vendor, several projects, MSA first, SOWs beneath. Every relationship gets a planned exit, EOL and EOSL. The rulebook has 4 tiers, in descending altitude: policy, broad, mandatory, deliberately high level, approved at CEO level, the only tier with that signature. Its contents: why security matters, the mandatory CIA protection, the information ownership statement, the named responsible executive, and the delegation of authority to the CISO to issue the lower tiers. Standard, mandatory detail, lower approval level, changes often. A technical mandate like using AES 256 belongs here, not in the policy. Procedure, mandatory step-by-step with timelines. Guideline, the only non-mandatory tier. Real-world document names blur. The distinction that holds is altitude, mandatoriness, and who signs. Sometimes a rule cannot be met. The exception is not a policy revision. That is the trap in every exception scenario. The request is a document with a fixed list. The requirement, the reason, the justification, the scope and duration, the associated risks, the compensating controls in the meantime, the return to compliance plan, and the risks that stay unmitigated. A named authority approves it. Anything temporary carries a remediation plan. The outside rules matched to their industries. High PAA, U.S. health providers, insurers, clearinghouses. PCI DSS, card merchants and service providers. And it is a contractual obligation, not a law. That is the first trap. GLBA, U.S. financial institutions. And the definition is far broader than banks. A college administering student loans, a real estate appraiser, a debt collector all count. It demands a formal security program and a named responsible individual. SOX, U.S. Public Company Financial Records. GDPR, personal data of EU residents, with worldwide reach. FERPA, U.S. Student Educational Records. The shape of the map, the United States is a patchwork. The European Union is centralized. Frameworks give structure to those obligations. Structure, not technology. COBIT 2019 first. 5 objective domains: EDM, APO, BAI, DSS, MEA. Then, the NIST pair, as a deliberate contrast. The cybersecurity framework is the broad control structure. 5 functions: identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. Watch the vocabulary. Incident response words like contain are the distractor, not a 6th function. 3 components. The core, 4 implementation tiers from partial to adaptive, and profiles comparing current state against target. The RMF SP 800-37 is different. The formal U.S. federal process for selecting, implementing, and assessing controls and authorizing a system. Then the ISO numbering drill 27001 is the ISMS standard 27701, its privacy extension 27002 advisory, 27004 monitoring, 31000 general risk management. Beneath all of it, CIS benchmarks, platform-level baselines, a tier below the frameworks. Proof comes in 2 registers. The audit, formal, tested, third-party, ending in a compliance statement. The assessment, informal, interview-based, commissioned by the organization. Then, the SOC matrix, 2 independent axes. Category is scope. SOC 1 is financial reporting controls. SOC 2 is security and privacy with results shared under NDA. SOC 3 is the public version. Type is the time dimension. Type 1, design and suitability as of a date. Type 2 adds operating effectiveness over a period. The TEL, shared under NDA with no effectiveness opinion. SOC 2, Type 1. 1 pass over the domain. 1 incident, 5 kinds of damage. 3 objectives, 3 matching threats. 2 hats, 1 accountable per job. Strategy from threat research, SWOT, and gap analysis into SMART goals. Controls by mechanism and effect. Data with an owner, guarded in 3 states. Board to CISO, business case, umbrella agreement. 4 tiers, exceptions, outside rules, frameworks, proof in audits and SOC reports. Risk management next. Then the threat landscape.